Distinguished guests, colleagues, friends, good afternoon and assalamu alaikum. I come here today wearing multiple hats as the head of EBM, who have partnered with the Dawn Media Group from the very beginning, believing in the criticality of this topic. As chairperson of the Pakistan Business Council, to highlight the role and responsibility of the private sector of Pakistan, and as patron of the Pakistan Agriculture Coalition, who are doing commendable work in this field, and above all, as a concerned Pakistani citizen. All those hats, one concern, the future of food in Pakistan. We meet at a point of reckoning. Across the world, food systems are buckling. A pandemic shook our supply chains. The war in Ukraine pulled wheat out of the global market. The war in Iran has raised fuel prices and tightened fertilizer supply. And above it all, through it all, climate change has been the quiet, relentless force that grows, that determines what grows, where it grows, and whether it grows at all. Now, let's turn our gaze home. Ask ourselves a simple question. Which sector of our economy is most vulnerable to climate change? The answer is agriculture. In 2022, the Indus broke its bank and broke our hearts. 80% of Sindh's rice crop, gone. 80% of its cotton, gone. Both blows to our exports. That same year, a historic heat wave wilted our wheat fields and forced us to import. Draining the foreign exchange we can least afford to lose. Last autumn, the rain on our eastern border swallowed more than 6% of Punjab's farmland. These are not freak events anymore. This is the new climate of our country. Ask any farmer, they will tell you the seasons no longer arrive on time. They are wandering across the calendar. Pakistan's agriculture is not facing a future crisis from climate change. It is living one right now. When policymakers in Pakistan think about food security, they think of one word, wheat. And rightly so. Wheat puts the calories on our table. Wheat is the staple of our staples. We at English Biscuit know a thing or two about wheat. We know it from the field to the factory. And here is what we have come to understand. We are the world's largest, 8th largest wheat producer, and yet we import it. Well, let that sink in with us. We are amongst the top 8 producers, and yet we have to now import. The harder truth is this: climate change is outpacing our grains in yield. At current population growth rates, Pakistan could import millions of tons of wheat in the coming decade if we do not move faster. Cotton tells the story of exports we cannot make. Wheat tells the story of imports we cannot afford, and citizens who can no longer afford to eat. But here is what I most want you to take home today. Food security is not made on the farm alone. It is made or lost in the supply chains that follow. Last summer in Punjab, 12 spells of rain fell between mid-June and the end of August, right when the corn harvest was coming to markets. Our mandis had no modern warehousing to speak of. The corn rotted, prices climbed, millers turned to wheat to make poultry feed. Wheat prices climbed too, and it all ended predictably in tears with government raids and impoundments from across the province. This is what climate change looks like when it collides with a supply chain that was never modernized. And let us never forget the people who keep the system alive. The back-breaking work of our farms is done in great measure by women. Of Pakistan's 30 million agricultural labor, women are not a minority. They are the backbone. On the other end of the chain, Pakistanis are already going hungry. Just last week, the FAO and the World Food Programme's Global Report on Food Crises 2026 named Pakistan among the top 10 countries facing acute food insecurity. Within the top 10. Food insecurity was once the burden of the poorest. It still is. But with war on our doorstep and climate at our windows, it is fast becoming a question for every Pakistani. And 44% of us live below the poverty line. I have laid out the challenges. Now let me speak of our blessings. This is a land of 5 rivers, and beneath them the Indus aquifer. When the surface fails us, the aquifer sustains us. This is a land of 60 million acres of arable soil. Every season, every agroclimatic zone, from the snow line to the desert. And above all, this is the land of our farmers. Their grit, their ingenuity, their deep wisdom of soil and sky passed down through generations. We cannot fail a country so blessed. We cannot fail farmers so steadfast. So with all of this, the rivers, the land, the seasons, the farmers, the question almost asks itself, why have we not seized this? Why are we not the breadbasket of the region? Why are we not attracting investments from across Asia? The answer is uncomfortable, but it must be said. Our political economy is holding us back, and nowhere is this clearer than in the chain that stands between the farmer and the market. A small landholder in Pakistan often captures only a fraction of the final retail price of the wheat he grows, or whatever he grows. The rest is taken by a long chain of intermediaries. The commission agents in our mandis, the middlemen who set the price he receives at the harvest, sometimes the same person who lent him the money for seed and now dictates what he must give him insurance. None of it will change his life if the structure that captures the value he creates remains untouched. The mindset that protects this structure is what has held Pakistani agriculture back for decades. It is the reason the farmer remains poor while the supply chain prospers. It is the reason capital does not flow to the farm. And it is the first thing that has to change. This calls for introspection, for honest analysis, for courageous actions. So what do? It begins where it must always begin, with the farmer. We cannot reverse the climate alone, but we can equip our farmers to live with it. A very informative presentation was given earlier by Ms. Iram on water management and the role of the farmer. And I found that to be really very, very enlightening. And this is exactly what she was also referring to in her presentation on water management. So how do we help? First, better seeds. Heat-resistant hybrid corn has already reached our farmers. What we must do is do this for every crop. And that requires a regulatory regime that welcomes, not strangles, the private sector that delivers those seeds to the field. Second, crop insurance. The vast majority of our farmers are smallholders. They cannot afford the premiums. The government must pay it for them, as governments do around the world. Our neighbor to the east has paid out over $20 billion to nearly 200 million farmer applications in the last 9 years. This is one of the highest return investments available to a country in our position. Third, credit. Our banks have long been shy of farmers, but the government of Punjab's Kisan card with a 30% first loss guarantee, and now the state bank's Zarkhezi program with a 10% first loss guarantee from the federal government, these are the foundations to build on, and let us build those. The fourth, water. Pakistan puts 93% of its fresh water into agriculture and recovers far less than it should. Field trials in Punjab show drip irrigation in citrus orchards deliver a 105% yield increase with 50% water savings. The technology exists, the field evidence is there in Pakistan. The blocker has been deployment, not affordability. Fifth, and most important, technology. Artificial intelligence and satellite data must be harnessed responsibly to deliver hyperlocal weather advisories, market prices, pest warnings, irrigation guidance, and credit scoring. All of it on a farmer's phone. All of it in time to act. And beyond the farm, the supply chain. Even if we grow enough, can we store enough? Can we move enough? Can we secure enough? Look to our neighbor to the east. They launched a multi-year national program to build foundational grain storage and logistics, anchored by private capital and private execution. Pakistan must do the same. And finally, a word to those who hold the levers of policy. Progress requires trust. Trust of the farmer, who must not wake up wondering if the government will abandon him. Trust of the private sector, which cannot live under the constant perils of raids upon its premises. Trust of the banks, which must feel safe lending to those who feed us. We heard from our esteemed ministers and panelists the gap between funding that can be tapped into to the outcomes needed is bankable plans, projects, and execution. And this is where the private sector comes in. With our discipline of execution, we are best placed to lead the transformation of the agri-food sector in the face of the perils of the climate change. The private sector needs to step up. The public sector, policymakers, and regulators need to give them the space to deliver rather than hinder them. Our last great triumph in agriculture was the Green Revolution, and it was not just about the seed. It was about the whole ecosystem: seed, irrigation, fertilizer, roads, and the empowerment of the farmer. In that era, the government led, the private sector followed. Today, the moment calls for the reverse. Let the private sector take the wheel. Let the government lead from behind, setting the policy, shaping the regulation, holding the framework steady so that our farmers can feed not only this nation, but help feed the world. We have the rivers, we have the land, we have the seasons, we have the farmers, we have the will. What remains is to act. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. Really learned a lot about the food ecosystems that we have in our country at this point in time. I'll move to the last panel before our tea networking break. This is the largest cohort of individuals that's going to come up. It's a very strong panel that's been put together. So, may I first request our moderator, Mr. Kazim Saeed, the Chief Executive Officer of the Pakistan Agricultural Coalition, to come up, and followed by our speakers, Mr. James Robert Okot, the acting country representative for FAO in Pakistan, Mr. Hassan Khurram Hanif, a progressive farmer and agri consultant, Mr. Hamza Kamal, the head of marketing Syngenta Pakistan, Mr. Osman Zahir Ahmed, chairman Pakistan Dairy Association and CEO Fauji Foods, Ms. Coco Ushiyama, the country representative for Pakistan for the World Food Programme, Mr. Kashif Thanvi, the investment director at Acumen, and lastly, Major General Shahid Nazir, the chief executive officer of the Green Pakistan Initiative.
Afternoon. Thank you very much, Dr. Zeelaf, for stimulating Keynote. We have a stellar panel, and my job is to make sure that we hear as much from them as possible, so I'm going to try to stay out of your way. The only thing I'm going to point out is that all the sessions in this conference, you're going to see, most of the time you're going to find sectors talking about climate as something that comes from outside their sector and affects them, manufacturing or banks, etc. It's something to include in their business model. Agriculture is the business where climate is inside your business model every single day of the year, even before we had this level of climate change. So let's start first by hearing from a practicing farmer what their experience of dealing with climate change without all the tools that we have been talking about that ought to be with farmers that Dr. Zeelaf pointed out. So I'm going to request Mr. Hassan Khurram Hanif, who's a practicing farmer, to tell us a little bit about that. Hassan, over to you.
Thank you, Kazim. So I think this really brings to light some of the issues we've discussed today. Climate directly affects us all across the agricultural value chain, but farmers are most directly impacted. Kazim, I think the biggest issue is it adds a lot of uncertainty to our business model. We often, in an educated audience like this, we talk about risk-adjusted returns. We cannot calculate our risk. We have absolutely no way of doing so. I'll highlight a few problems which we've faced in the past. We have major climatic events. We've spoken about floods. We've spoken about torrential rain. Even minor climatic events, the kinds that we don't feel, such as the pleasant weather that we had in the last month in Punjab, in which it was raining really frequently. My wife and kids were really happy. I wasn't. All our wheat crop lodged. We saw yields decline by around 10 to 15% this year compared to last year. And now we face a wheat crisis. Even though our area under cultivation actually, as per official records, went up a bit, we still are short by 2.5 to 3 million tons, and that's because of the weather. You can't blame anybody for it, but you cannot plan around these events. If we talk about 2 years ago, we had intense heat waves in the summer, and most of our early rice season crops failed, to the extent that lots of us cut up our rice crop and fed it to our animals because there was no grain on it. Such things are very difficult to plan for, and in an economy that is already very stressed, the agricultural economy, I think no one needs to explain this, is one of thin margins, lots of unpredictability, and now you add a lot of risk to it. It means that lots of people will choose either not to do this profession or not to invest in it as much as we need to invest in this, because as we all know, it's a grossly underinvested sector. So, sorry, back to you.
Thank you very much. That gives a taste of what life is like as a farmer under these. I'll next ask Hamza Kamal from Syngenta how innovative agriculture input can empower farmers in the face of this level of climate.
Thanks, Kazim. When we talk about being innovative and being productive, I think we'll have to go back to our roots. And when I say roots, I mean it literally as well as figuratively. Figuratively, the root of all agriculture starts from the seed. And today in the world, there are climate resilient seeds available. What we need to do is bring them to Pakistan and keep, and I'll be very honest about it, keep the public sector out of it. Let the private sector deal with it. And what we have achieved in corn, let us achieve in other crops as well. And figuratively about roots, when I say, I mean soil as well. So while we all talk about water scarcity, floods, water abundance, and everything else, but we are not talking about how climate is impacting the soil health. So the bacteria in the soil actually act as a beneficial organism for our agriculture. And with continued temperatures above 50 degrees, that gets destroyed and ultimately results in low productivity of the farm. So secondly, what I would talk about is precision agriculture, and then again coming from a farm input company. When I say precision agriculture, that is in terms of farm input, specifically fertilizers. Again, looking at the best practices in the world, we have customized fertilizers available now. So a farmer would first test his soil, check the level of N, P, Ks, and other micronutrients, and then get customized fertilizer made for their crop. Again, we while are now dabbing into NPKs, we still are far away from customized fertilizer, which is according to the soil that I have in my field. So that is something that again we should look into, and then it's something that is a just do it item, a low hanging fruit. I'm using some cliches, but it is what it is. Uh, Thirdly, when I talk about productivity, I think more than productivity today, what's important is predictability, and for that we need accurate forecasting of our temperatures, of our weather, of our climate conditions, and all of these again. In this case, I wouldn't say in the best in among the world, but it's available in Pakistan today. There are organizations which are offering uh, high accuracy forecasting for weather, and based on those weather patterns you can plan your crops, you can plan your inputs, you can plan when to spray on a crop based on the temperature, the rainfall data and everything. So we don't have to reinvent anything in agriculture. We know how to do it. We've been doing it for, I don't know, 6,000 years, because agriculture was being done when the early industrialization was there. And today we only need to modify our practices by a small margin, and then the result would be greater in productivity. So just a few ideas, just a few inputs that I could share, looking at what is available in the world, what we're doing in Pakistan, and what can we implement quickly in our field. Back to you, Kazim.
Thank you, Hamza. When Hamza says government should get out of the way, public sector should get out of the way, I know a lot of people smiled and nearly started cheering. What we need is, we can't do this without government. What you need is government to get out of the commercial side of these activities, from the commercial activity, and I think also to facilitate the private sector in a way that they don't have to wait for seed approvals for years and years. Um, Now, agriculture is not only about crops but also about livestock. In fact, the estimates in our national accounts, GDP accounts, 60% of the agriculture GDP is livestock. So I'm going to request Mr. Usman Zahir Ahmed, who leads Fauji Food and is chairman of the Pakistan Dairy Association, to give us some idea of how the dairy sector is being impacted by climate change.
Thank you, Kazim. I think there are a couple of themes that we picked up earlier in the day today. जैसे आपने कहा, livestock is in Pakistan mostly about dairy, and if you look at it, the consumers in Pakistan buy something close to 8.3 trillion rupees worth of milk every year. So that is a significant number. And I think something that Dr. Zeelaf Munir just touched upon, the challenge that we have is that out of that 8.3 trillion, nearly 7.9 trillion rupees is informal. It's unorganized. It flows through a supply chain where the milk does not remain milk. I think earlier in the day, Dr. Iram was talking about it in terms of our, so, you know, we need this land and the resources and the water to grow our crops and to feed the animals that give this productivity of milk. Our yields are one of the lowest in the world. At 3.8 liter per animal, Pakistan is far behind the regional average of 6 liter, and Europe is 22 liters per annum. So what that means is that we are missing out on, and in order to change that, it's not something that we have to reinvent entirely. If we learn from India, what they did was that they basically put in a, so if you want to drive up yield in dairy, there can be multiple factors, but the stage that we are in, we have to look for the single largest contributing factor. What is it that's going to move the dial the most? In our case, it is genetic. Over the years, we have had a genetic dilution of the farmers leading up to this unprecedented drop in yields in dairy sector in particular. This, by the way, has not happened in, for instance, in poultry, where the opposite has happened and the genetics have contributed significantly. So a 1 liter improvement in yield would mean roughly 3 trillion rupees in GDP. So this is the scale and the potential. And the way to go about it is to have a genetic policy or a genetic direction in place, something which is easy to follow for our farmers. We can't take the path of Europe, where every single animal is tagged, tracked, known. The genetic path is very well known. But we have to take a simplified, what is the ideal cross that you want to promote for the local breeds. Whether it is Jersey, whether it is Friesian, it is the first step. And that, if we, for instance, if we can take this 3.8 to the regional average of 6, that's additional, 7 trillion rupees, almost doubles the dairy production for the country. So I think that's the path. And when we talk about it in terms of, we talk about what is one thing that the farmer needs to do. At the same time, we talk about what is one thing that needs to happen for this sector. It is formalization. 98% of dairy is informal. All of Nestle, all of Friesland, Engro, all the dairy companies put together are just 2%. You cannot direct or organize or make productive a segment which is so informal, as Dr. Zeelaf Munir was just talking about. The entire supply chain is unorganized, and what that means is there is another angle to the climate challenge that we have, which is the human challenge. We have 40% children under 5 are stunted currently, which means, and this is a paradoxical thing, because Pakistan is one of the highest dairy consuming nations in the world. So with a 0.6 liter per person consumption of dairy, it is paradoxical that we have such high stunting. So I think this is something we, if there's one thing that we need to do to improve productivity, that's genetics. If there's one thing we need to do to improve our productivity and nourishment and revenue, frankly, it is formalization of the sector.
Right. Thank you very much, Mark. I think the perspective we usually take is of what happens in Pakistan, how things have been. And often you find people saying, well, this is a unique country, you can't import lessons from other countries. So we have the fortune of having two experts on the panel who are international professionals who have great love for Pakistan. I'm going to request Mr. James Okot, who's leading the Food and Agriculture Organization in Pakistan, and I know as an international professional he really believes in Pakistan. and the successes that have happened within Pakistan. So, James, if you could help us see, in light of the challenges in Pakistan and also some of the successes we've seen, what international experience from comparative countries can teach us. Please.
Thank you very much, Kazim. I think that the most important aspect is to appreciate that in Pakistan, I think it is largely informed by or shaped by the industry system. To what extent are we harnessing the system? I think we invested a lot of time in ensuring delivery without looking at the issues of efficiency. Now, as the water scarcity is running out, we are now beginning to look at efficiency as a point of address. I wouldn't go out of Pakistan to look for examples because we have lots of good practice. Lots of good practice. The challenge is they're extremely fragmented. They're extremely small in nature, and very often, where is the farmer in this discussion? I don't know how many farmers beyond the progressives are in this room. So very often we discuss about the farmers, climate change, when they are not in place. However, the opportunities are enormous in Pakistan. A lot of models have been tested out. We only need to make sure that we are able to bring this together and take it to scale. Of course, Pakistan also, we need to look at Pakistan from its size. Which country do we want to compare to Pakistan? There are good practices which have been validated. There are good pathways that have been validated. I'll give a close relative in terms of the basin to Pakistan, Egypt. Egypt went into satellite-based water management, whereby they're doing a lot of water accounting based on satellite imagery to make sure that they are able to see what extent they are using water efficiently, so the monitoring. When you look at Morocco, Morocco has a very similar situation like in Balochistan, where there is a lot of water scarcity. They have been able to produce largely because they aligned the crops to the water availability. When you look at climate smart agricultural practices that have been promoted, many of them are appropriate, but we have not aligned the appropriate crops to the practices. So there are a number of things which are already existing, and that is the hopeful message I want to bring to this panel, that there is a lot that is existing. We only need to recast what we are to do and how we are to harness those opportunities.
Thank you so much, James. Always such a pleasure to hear someone who believes in Pakistan more than many Pakistanis seem to. Thank you for that message of hope. There is a great deal of work that's already happened. It may not all be at scale, but we don't have to go too far afield to find solutions. Now, when we talk about agriculture and the supply chain, one thing that they say in the trade is that finance is that golden thread that holds the supply chains together. And so I'm going to request Mr. Kashif Thanvi, who has built probably the largest rural lending or agri-lending portfolio in the private sector at HPL, and then is building a $50 million equity fund with Acumen. So he knows a thing or two about finance and agriculture. So Kashif, if you could tell us about what are the hurdles that are keeping credit from flowing or finance from flowing to farm.
Assalamu alaikum and a very good afternoon. Thank you, Kazim. And this is a very loaded question that he has asked, and perhaps we need a much longer session, but I'll try to be as concise as possible. Let me briefly contextualize agriculture, food security, and climate first, and then we will briefly deliberate on the structural trap that on one side the farmer faces as a borrower, and on the other side the banking system faces as a lender to the farmers. As we all know that the demand for food, feed, fiber, and fuel is only going to increase, primarily because of a population growth, and secondly because of the rising income level. To put this in perspective, if we look at the global population, it was 6 billion in the year 2000. We are now at 8 billion, and it is estimated that we'll be crossing 9 billion by 2050. So a 1.5 times increase in 50 years. But the situation back home here is that we were 150 million in the year 2000, and we are estimated to be around 375 million by 2050. A 2.5 times growth, which means the need for the agriculture commodities will be significantly more, and we don't have to wait for 2050. It is increasing every day, every year as we speak. And a country like Pakistan, we don't have the liberty to remain a net importer of agricultural commodities, which means self-sufficiency. At the same time, the farmers are increasingly suffering or facing the climate events: floods, drought, erratic rainfall, heat stress, pest attacks, livestock diseases, and the list goes on. And this is further constrained by limited resources such as land and water, where they are hugely constrained. This is exactly the point where agricultural finance and access to formal finance plays a critical and a pivotal role. A farmer who has access to farm debt, a farmer who has access to insurance, crop insurance, and I'm emphasizing not crop loan insurance, crop insurance, and a farmer who has access to advisory will always be able to invest in better seed, in appropriate fertilizers, in effective water irrigation and mechanization. And at the same time, the access to weather advisory and crop advisory will help that farmer adapt proactively. Now, the life of the farmer who is financially excluded is very different. They operate very differently. Mostly, they access finance through informal sources. Generally, they use suboptimal farm inputs, and they have limited or no access to appropriate set of information. And the problem significantly increases when the climate shock happens, when the climate event occurs. A farmer with crop insurance and access to finance will be able to absorb the loss and move on with the next crop cycle. Whereas the farmer who has no access to insurance and no access to formal finance will get into that poverty trap for years. And that is where majority of the Pakistani farmers are stuck in that unfortunate vulnerability and debt trap. Now, to understand the constraints around the access to finance, keeping this whole backdrop, I think it is important to, I'll just quote what Usman just mentioned, that 7.9 trillion out of 8.3 trillion is undocumented. That is informal market. Now, from a supply side, as the bank, what they want is information. What they want is documentation, because if they are giving money, it's very important that they understand what are going to be the cash flows. From the supply side, another challenge that comes is that the voracious appetite of the government of Pakistan for decades has eroded the banking capacity to work in the priority sectors in general. We'll see some islands of excellence within the banks, but as a system, if we look at it, the number of farmers who are financially included are only 3 million, which means that 75% or more farmers are financially excluded and they don't have access to formal financial structures. Now, on the demand side as well, I think it's important to highlight that the farmers are hugely fragmented. The average landholding in Pakistan is less than 5 acres, which significantly reduces the economic potential of that unit, and hence the subsistence farming has a direct negative impact on the farmer economics. I think I'll just pause here and we'll talk about the policies when we go into the second round,
Right.
if at all.
So you can see we were introduced as the largest panel, which is right for agriculture. That's the way it should be. But we only had 50 minutes after the keynote speech. This happens to us in agriculture. We don't complain. But what we've worked out is we've agreed that we'll do one round of just giving some background, and the second round will be rapid fire, just one or two policies that each person on this panel recommends the government to adopt. So moving a little bit further down the supply chain to food, really, you heard about hunger in this country. Hunger is the crown of poverty, I think. And we have the fortune of having Ms. Coco Ushiyama, who's the country representative of the World Food Program in Pakistan and knows the country well. And I'm going to request her to talk about how in Pakistan, the food security is being impacted by climate.
Thank you, Kazim. As WFP, when we talk about security, we have to look at also the shocks, climatic shocks, conflict, also cost of living crisis. And these are major shocks globally, which we also see as the major drivers of hunger. I think it's also very interesting for Pakistan that, as Kate said, we can also share some of our lessons to the globe, but we can also learn.
You could
other
bring your
countries.
mic a little closer, Coco.
Sorry,
you.
I hope you can hear me. I was just saying that while we can, as Pakistan, learn from other countries, Pakistan can also offer some of the solutions when it comes to food security. But I think one of the key lessons that we are looking at globally is the need to build resilience to climatic shocks and stressors, which is, again, one of the major drivers of hunger. But in other words, what we're saying is build resilience in the entire shock cycle, before, during, and after these shocks. So when it comes to climatic shocks, we have some really interesting examples, like Philippines. It's another country which is highly disaster prone, but also doing interesting things like risk layering. What does it mean? It's approached disaster risk financing as not just one instrument, but as a package. So they have budget reserves, contingent credit, paramedic insurance, local government coverage, crop insurance, and public asset protection. So risk layering, including through their financing. Philippines is also doing anticipatory action. In the region, they're one of our champions. But I'm very proud that Pakistan is also coming up as another champion on anticipatory action, which really links forecasts, climatic met forecasts, to pre-agreed triggers to support so that support reaches farmers before a shock. Again, so Pakistan, through NDMA, they will be launching soon the first national anticipatory action strategy. We're looking forward to that, again, building on some of the successes from the Philippines. Another lesson we have is paramedic insurance and cat bonds, such as in countries like Mexico. These tools show that finance can be arranged in advance and released quickly when pre-agreed triggers are met, rather than waiting for months for damage assessments to be conducted, appeals, humanitarian appeals and financing to be agreed across the layers of the government. I think the third example that we can learn from is countries like Bangladesh, which on the food side, they maintain food contingency stock, or what they call pre-positioned reserves, so that again, when shocks hit, the food is available almost immediately, often within 40 hours, rather than waiting for the new procurement. So I've shared some of these examples from other countries, but the main takeaway for Pakistan is that different risks need different financing tools. And for Pakistan, the point is not to copy one model and stick to that. It is really to build on the layered system suitable for Pakistan's context and built on better risk data, early warning, pre-arranged triggers, pre-agreed triggers and pre-arranged finances and delivery channels, again, so that assistance could reach the vulnerable households very fast. I think I just pause there, but just to say that Pakistan already is doing many of these things, and I'm excited that as we go on, soon other countries will be learning from Pakistan as one of the best models.
Thank you very much. That deserves a clap, guys, please. Thank you very much. Now, I think Dr. Zeelaf earlier mentioned the last time great ambition was applied to agriculture, that was the Green Revolution. And since then, it seems like agriculture has been a little bit off target in terms of government focus. I think General Shahid Nasir, who leads the Green Pakistan Initiative, he has been leading some of the most ambitious plans for upgrade of Pakistan's agriculture. So I'm going to request General Saab to talk about how he's also thinking about climate change and the impact of climate change.
Thank you, sir. It's very rightly said that if agriculture goes wrong, nothing else will have a chance to go right. If what we are producing, if we fail to produce that, there will be panic, there will be chaos, and there's going to be a lot of stress. And once we look at our agriculture, especially focusing on Pakistan's agriculture, the first green revolution was launched in the era of 1960s, and we just focused on three things. We provided farmers the awareness and education through experts that we had at that time. We provided them with the fertilizers, which were essential at that time. And then we had a mechanism with which adequate water was provided through development of canal command system. And we produced almost 3 times more than what we were producing before the initiation of that initiative. Now about 60 years, we have lived on to the fruits that we yielded through the first green revolution which came in Pakistan. And we are here with another Green Pakistan initiative which has been launched about 2 years back by the federal government and the top leadership of Pakistan. The fundamentals of this are actually focusing on what challenges we are facing. And the biggest challenge that we are facing as of today is the climate change. There are unpredictable weather patterns that the farmers are actually confronted with. There is scarcity of water sometimes, and there is excess of water sometimes. So the farmer has to be ready in order to ensure that he manages both stresses, scarcity as well as excess of water. So what the Green Pakistan initiative is doing, we have 5 fundamental pillars. We are turning brown into green. We are focusing on the desert areas which are there in Pakistan. And as we all understand, being citizens of this country and many learned people who are part of the forum at the moment, Pakistan has vast stretches of desert, which are very, very fertile, provided we approach those deserts with the crops and with the patterns which are suitable for those. And we have many models around the globe, and we are following the same. The slogan that Green Pakistan has is modernize, mechanize, and maximize the agri potential of Pakistan. In order to feed a population of about 250 million, which has a trajectory of moving towards 350 million and maybe a little more in another 20 years or so, we have to produce much more than what we are producing. Our staple crop on which we rely is considered to be wheat. We have to change the way we are living in order to offset the challenges of climate change. A very simple solution that from only wheat-based breads, we have to shift to multigrain, because we are not only producing wheat, we are producing corn, we are producing barley, we are producing many other crops which can be used for as our staple crop. The third thing that we are doing and we need to do, that is the farmer's facilitation. The farmer is the community which is feeding almost the entire nation. They keep their grain at the harvest time for themselves, but they feed the non-farmers community. The non-farmer community is the most stressed community because they don't produce anything for themselves. So it is the farmer who has to be facilitated, and the first facilitation has to be in the form of education and the awareness, which we must take to the doorstep of our farmers, rather than educating them from forums which are far away from them. And as one of the honorable panelists, Mr. Robert Mard, and mentioned that if one person who is not here about whom we are talking is the farmer. So we have to have the mechanism where we take that knowledge to his doorstep. And that we are doing in the form of establishment of green agri malls, where we have a chain of agri malls, which is not only meant to provide him the necessary inputs at the cost, which gives him the cost benefit to his crop. The education is also one of the fundamental purpose of establishing these green agri malls. And then one thing with which we can offset the devastating effects of the climate change is seed. We have to invest, we have to develop those seeds which are drought resistant, which are pest resistant, which have more yield than of the traditional open pollinated varieties of seeds that we have, from hybrid seeds and GMOs. So a lot of debates can be initiated on that. And the last and the most important thing, we have to have the collaborations. Not only domestic collaborations, we have to have the international collaboration. On this globe, we have to live like a single community where we must be doing better by sharing our knowledge in all spheres of agriculture. But interestingly, since the time culture has come into agri, which has made it agriculture, we are facing more challenges than what we were facing before. So we have to address this culture of agri. Instead of making it agriculture alone, we have to have a productivity culture in our agri sector, because our farmer is the fundamental businessman. What he spends on his field and what he gets from his field will define what kind of crop he's going to pursue in the next cropping season.
Right.
So that is where I think a lot needs to be done. So these are the few things which I believe we are learning from this wonderful forum for further modernizing this initiative. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, General Saab. Now we'll try to learn. My advice to the panelists is let's try to learn from our farmers. and make do with the resources we have, which is time. So my question to each of you, just take 1 minute to talk about one, maximum two things, two policy initiatives or measures that you feel government should take. And we'll go in the same order. Hassan Khurramani.
Thank you, Kazim. So I think we've spoken a lot about crop insurance. We've heard people comment on that. If we can have effective crop insurance in Pakistan, farmers can de-risk themselves and that can help them invest a lot more in their business. That's one. The second thing which we haven't heard that much about is that there's a knowledge gap as well. We talk about climate smart agriculture. We talk about a lot of techniques which people have already tried and tested, but they are not disseminated amongst the public. And the reason for that is that lots of these university trials and findings are not applicable in farmer fields, or they are not being taken out there. And today, when we have social media, we have multiple tools to reach people. I think it's time that we try and do that. We can produce even crops like rice with half the amount of water that we typically use. This has been tried, tested, proven. We don't do it. I also don't do it because I don't know how to do it on my farm given my conditions. There should be somebody out there to teach us how to do this. The government institutions exist, agricultural departments exist, extension exists, universities exist. They have their land grants, they have their funding, but there still remains information asymmetry, especially in adaptation strategies. And perhaps it's time that we think about how we approach this problem as well.
Thank you very much. Hamza Kamal, Sanjata.
Yep. So I think in a very few words, the speed with which governments is active on banning things, I think they need to bring in the same speed in implementing things, one. Secondly, I think our focus should shift from chemical they're biologicals, they have minimal impact on environment, minimal impact on humans who are consuming that output, and obviously they also benefit the soil as a ecological environment as well. So very quickly,
That's splendid. Thank you. Those just the messages I think the country needs given the state of our soil. James, I think specific that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think my biggest plea is to provide resources to our researchers. We have brilliant scientists. I think we really need to support them because climate change is dynamic, the needs are dynamic, we need to put more money there. Number two, we also need to rethink the ongoing strategy of solarizing tube wells. If we don't regulate this, in 5 to 10 years, the groundwater will be at stake. Thank you.
That's fair. So thank you. That really deserves a round of applause. Usman,
Very quickly, in terms of two things, to improve the productivity, have a policy on which direction the genetic of the national herd needs to go. And second is pursue a strategy of formalization. Minimum pasteurization law is something that has happened in the world 100 years ago. The business and the private sector and the people who do this business will take care of the farmer as they do right now. They'll bring the farmer along in their path of development. It will share the burden of malnourishment, will share the burden of generating revenue from the government. Thank you.
thank you very much. Kashif?
So the biggest challenge for me right now is the speed recommendation. And by the way, agriculture needs patience and time, but I completely understand. So, let me mention it at the outset that there is no silver bullet policy that I would want to mention. Agriculture needs patience, it needs consistency, it needs perseverance. I think 2-3 things that I would want to highlight is that the policy design should be based on data and evidence. We need to move away from broad and general ideologies, and I'll just slightly talk about that. And secondly, there are times when the policies are very good, but they're executed poorly. And we have those examples in Pakistan or in any other country for that matter as well. First recommendation, I'll give two, is that we need to have an apex specialized agriculture rural institution. If US can have a farm credit system which is essentially covering for the farm credit, it's not the Citibanks and the JP Morgans of the world that are doing agriculture financing. It is the community banks, it is the ag banks in the US, it is the NABARD in India, under which the regional rural banks and cooperatives work. It is the BAC in Thailand. It is the Land Bank in Philippines. It is the Ag Bank in Vietnam. And one thing is in common. All of these banks and systems are backed by the government. However, somehow, we have started believing in the ideology of privatizing everything. I will not dwell into it further, but when it comes to agriculture credit, it needs the risk tolerance of a public mindset and to be managed in a professional manner. ZTBL is quoted as a bad example. I think a good strategy, a good policy to have a specialized institution executed poorly in the last few decades. The second, already Hassan pointed out, is about the crop insurance. We need national crop insurance immediately. We are already late in that. The first serious attempt was in 2008 when the crop loan insurance scheme came in. The foundation was to initiate that and evolve that into a crop insurance scheme. It didn't happen like that. We only had a major upgrade of crop loan insurance scheme a month back as a CLIS plus. So they have moved towards the yield index insurance. However, it is still limited to the borrowers only. So what will happen to the remaining 80-85% of the farmers? Globally, the crop insurance is subsidized by the government, be it the US, be it India, be it Thailand, be it Turkey. I think it's high time that we design it. The government partners in terms of picking up the premium, and it should be available to all the farmers here in Pakistan.
Thank you very much, Kazim. I'm glad there's a lot of wisdom coming to us through this panel. Next, I'll request Ms. Coco Kuchiyama.
Thank you. What we would like to see is a more formal framework for shock responsive social protection that is linked to the disaster risk financing. Pakistan, again, already has so many of the right building blocks, from robust early warning institutions to well-established disaster management authorities to strong provincial response capacity, as well as Benazir Income Support Program, one of the region's largest scalable social protection that's really working and showing good results, as well as strong community level experience. So what we need in practice is to bring these together in a system that is more predictable model that links the climate risks, agriculture, finance, disaster management, and social protection. In practice, what that would mean is to be agreeing in advance key parameters, such as what risks triggers action, who is responsible at each stage, what financing is available, which households are prioritized, and how assistance will be delivered. But again, with building on these building blocks, I'm sure it can be done. But that's one thing that we would.
Thank you very much. General Saab, I know आपने पहले identify कर दिए थे, but एक चीज अगर आप समझते हैं, तो please enlighten.
I think as our farm size is shrinking, the policy which must be rolled out yesterday should be national cooperative farming policy, with which the small farmers can get together and then they can have more productivity from their farm. Thank you.
That's very, very apt. Thank you very much. We are just about a couple of minutes over time for this session, which is fantastic. Thanks to the panelists. I just wanted to say before we conclude that yes, agriculture requires patience. but the development of our country and bringing prosperity to our farmers, that doesn't have to happen in the long run. That we need to feel urgency about that. You can see the solutions are there. It's a matter of political will. There's a lot of political will as well. But we have to be fair to the public sector. I know a lot of people may not see it that way. The public sector also has constraints of, in some cases, finances, but also, more importantly, capacity and capability. And that's where I think the private sector and its ability to execute that needs to be brought to bear. But we need to feel that urgency to get all this benefit to our farmers and make sure that the country has enough for food security and for our farmers to also be able to deal with climate resilience. Thank you very much for being a great audience. A round of applause for the panelists. Thank you.